So just a few years ago, I had said that it probably wasn't worth it to get a 4K TV, because not only were they extremely expensive at the time, but there also wasn't even that much content for them. There were only a handful of 4K media players like from Sony, but the only 4K content you could watch was what they had in their limited library of movies that you could download. But now things are much different. 4K TVs are actually affordable, though not cheap, and there is way more 4K content to watch. So you may have been asking yourself, is it time to get one of these Ultra HD TVs? Obviously the answer depends on a few things, so that's what this video is all about. First, let's get the easiest scenario out of the way, which is if you actually need a new TV for some reason, as opposed to just wanting to upgrade one you have. So perhaps your current TV broke and it needs to be replaced, or maybe you're moving into a new house and you need a TV for one of the rooms. The reason I say this is the easiest scenario is because the answer is yes. Yes, you should. At least I think so. If you know you're going to be buying a new TV anyway, I can't think of many reasons why you wouldn't get a 4K TV. 4K is quickly becoming the standard, and I think it's well worth it to spend the extra $100 to $200 to future-proof it. And you should also, by the way, probably make sure that you get one capable of HDR, high dynamic range. Most TVs these days should have this, even non-4K TVs, but you still want to double check. And if you're thinking, oh, well, this TV is just an extra to go in the guest room, I don't need 4K or something like that, then what you do is just move your main TV to wherever you need it and then get the new 4K TV as your main TV. I think you'll regret it if you go out and buy a brand new TV that's not 4K, because you'll probably feel like it's obsolete even less than a year from now, possibly. But that leads us to the next case, which is probably where most of you are right now, where you already have a perfectly good TV, maybe a couple years old, but it's full HD and works fine. And maybe you really spent a lot of money on it to make sure that you got the best looking one even. But the only thing is, it's not 4K. What do you do then? Obviously, there's a bunch of factors that come into play here. First of all, ask yourself whether you really want 4K right now, because it's totally reasonable if you don't. If you've got an HD TV and you think it looks fine, it probably doesn't make sense to upgrade. It's not like the higher resolution is going to make a TV show more entertaining or give a movie a better story. And I personally don't think the jump from 1080p to 4K is as noticeable as going from standard definition to HD. So definitely don't upgrade expecting to be blown away by how amazing it looks, because that might not be the case. Now, if you do think you want a 4K TV for any reason, that's great. Maybe you watched one at your friend's house and thought it looked good, or even just one at the store. But of course, there are some other things you gotta consider. Like, what kind of TV do you have right now, and how much money are you willing to spend on a new one? If you really want to go with a budget 4K television, you could do it, but it might not be the best move. For example, maybe you already have a really expensive 1080p TV, and it has great contrast levels, a big screen, lots of features. In that case, getting the cheapest 4K TV would be really stupid. The resolution would be higher, but the overall picture quality and extra features would really be worse. Really, the main thing you want is a good picture, and resolution isn't everything. On the other hand, maybe you do really have a crappy TV. Sure, it's 1080p, but it's really old and just doesn't look good. This time, it definitely might be worth it to upgrade even to a cheaper 4K TV, because on top of the higher resolution, TV technology has naturally improved over the years, so a cheap 4K TV these days will look better than a cheap TV from several years ago. Now, I guess that's really all common sense. Obviously, if your TV sucks, you should upgrade it if you're willing to spend the money, and you shouldn't if you're not. But maybe you're on the fence. The next thing you'll want to consider is how much use you'll actually get out of the higher resolution. How much 4K content would you actually be watching? These days, there are way more options for watching 4K television, movies, and even YouTube videos. So if you watch a lot of stuff in general, you'll most likely get good use out of it. The only exception would be probably if you only really watch cable TV, since no cable companies have rolled out 4K channels in any significant amount, if at all. Though chances are you have some other streaming services you could use. The big one, of course, is Netflix. They're adding more and more 4K content all the time and already have quite a bit on there. There's also Amazon Video, which has a lot of 4K content as well, and that's stuff you can watch for free if you have Amazon Prime. Then there's even YouTube if your TV has a YouTube app, or if you have Chromecast Ultra or something like that. Besides streaming though, there's also the relatively new 4K Blu-ray discs. Some of you might be thinking, what? Buying a movie on a disc? What is this? What year? But guess what? If you want the best image quality, a physical disc will blow streaming out of the water any day of the week. That's because streaming services have to compress the heck out of the video. Firstly, because most people would never be able to stream it at full uncompressed quality. It'd be a huge bandwidth. And secondly, because if someone has a data cap, they could go through it very quickly if they were to stream an uncompressed video. With a disc, none of that is a problem. The latest triple layer Blu-ray discs can hold up to 100 gigabytes. So while the typical video bitrate for streaming 4K online is a measly 15 megabits or so, on a disc, you can get up to 100 megabits per second, around there. So the truth is, if you want the true 4K experience, you need to watch something off a disc. Though there is one exception to the whole true 4K experience thing, which is gaming. With the latest game consoles like the Xbox One S and the PS4 Pro, you will get an awesome looking 4K image because there's no streaming involved, obviously. There's no compression required, it's just rendered on the console and put directly to the TV. And this also brings me to the next important point, where we can kill two birds with one stone. With 4K Blu-ray discs I just mentioned, you'll need one of the newer 4K Blu-ray players. The old ones won't work. Though instead of getting a standalone Blu-ray player, I'd actually recommend you get an Xbox One S. Not only can it play games in 4K, HDR, 10-bit, and all of that, it can also play 4K Blu-ray discs. And I mean, it can do a lot of other stuff too, like Netflix, other streaming services, everything. So even if you're not a big gamer, it just makes sense to get an Xbox One S, since it's probably cheaper anyway, and you can do a lot more than just play 4K Blu-rays on it. Now, I already hear some of you, what about PS4 Pro? It can do 4K. Yes, that's true. The PS4 Pro can play games at 4K, HDR, 10-bit, the whole shebang. But for some reason, Sony did not give it a 4K Blu-ray player. Yeah, I know, it's incredibly stupid, and pretty ironic too, considering that the PlayStation 3 was one of the first regular Blu-ray players. So sure, if you really want to play some PlayStation exclusives, by all means get a PS4 Pro. But if you don't really care about any console exclusive games, and you don't want to buy a separate Blu-ray player, the Xbox One S is clearly the way to go. Alright, so I know that was a lot about Blu-ray discs, but my main point is to help you figure out the different ways you might actually use the 4K resolution. If you know that you're really only going to stream the 4K video, never buy any discs, and you're not a big gamer, realize that you won't be getting the full benefit of the TV. So if you're on the fence, maybe hold off, since they're only going to be getting better and cheaper. On the other hand, if you see that there's a lot of ways you would actually use the 4K, you might have already convinced yourself to get one. Which brings us to one of the final questions. Get it now or later? And how much later? Well, to be honest, I think if you buy a good 4K TV today, it should last you a while. The newest ones I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show this year all looked amazing. They were super thin and pretty much had every feature you could imagine. It's kind of at the point, I think, where I'm not really sure what more they could even add besides little incremental updates like maybe slightly better HDR or something. I could be wrong, obviously, but I don't see any major groundbreaking features coming anytime soon, at least in the next year. Though, of course, that's mostly for the top-of-the-line TVs. If you're planning on getting the cheapest one possible, then yeah, waiting a year or so might pay off when the high-end features tend to trickle down to the cheaper models. But now the final consideration. What kind should you get? There's OLED, QLED, quantum dot, Super UHD. So which one should you pick? Well, I'll make it easy for you. If you can afford it, get OLED. Hands down the best overall picture quality in my opinion, but that's also kind of the consensus of everyone else too. The biggest advantage of OLED, if you don't already know, is that each pixel is illuminated individually, so there's no backlight. This means that if there's something black on the screen in the video that's supposed to be black, the pixels are totally black because they're just off, and there's no backlight bleed. This means that OLED pretty much has the best black levels and contrast of any TV technology right now. But that also means it's usually the most expensive. Now I have to mention that this doesn't mean that it's the absolute best in every way possible. For example, LED backlit TVs can be brighter than OLED, but I still think it's way better overall. If you don't want to shell out a bunch of money for OLED though, you still have a lot of options. The next best thing I'd say is probably Samsung's QLED, which is not OLED. QLED was definitely named to look like OLED, but the technology behind it is completely different. Instead of using LEDs in OLED, QLED uses Samsung's quantum dot technology. I won't get into the details, but the advantages of this is that they claim to have 100% color volume. And that probably went over everyone's head, but the simplified version is that even though QLED doesn't have quite the same ability to produce perfect blacks like OLED, it does have the ability to make even the brightest colors on the screen remain vivid. So for example, if you were to increase the brightness of the color blue on the screen, it would just become a brighter blue, as opposed to older technologies where you need to shift the color more towards white in order to get that brightness up. So hopefully that makes sense. Instead of moving towards a white to get it bright, it actually just goes to a brighter color. Then there's LG's Super UHD TVs, which use what they call nanocells. I saw these at CES, but they didn't make too much of a big deal about them. They definitely looked good, but I think the technology they use is kind of similar to quantum dot, though maybe not quite as advanced as it is in QLED. Now those are all higher end type panels, which won't be cheap. If you want to save some money, you're probably going to be looking at getting an LED backlit TV, which is not to be confused with OLED. And these are going to vary greatly in quality and price, anywhere from $300 in the lowest end to even several $1,000s. And if you want my opinion, I'd stick to either LG, Samsung, or Sony for these, and at least then you know you're going to get something decent. And the final piece of advice I have is, like I mentioned before, no matter what kind you choose, try to get one that's capable of HDR, high dynamic range. Not all videos and movies will have it, but for the stuff that does, it definitely looks better. And unlike 3D, remember that, HDR is not a gimmick, and it's only going to become more popular as time goes on, so I think it's worth spending a little bit extra money to get one that supports it. It's really just as big a deal as 4K, I personally think. So I think that covers just about everything. Hopefully you guys now have a better idea if you want to get a 4K TV or not. If you want to keep watching, I'll put some other videos right here, highly recommended. And don't forget to subscribe for new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and also consider enabling notifications too. Let me know what you think. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from you guys. So as usual, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.